Hey, hello there, Saints fans. Um, Second round of the draft will be starting roughly about 30 minutes or so. I decided to pop on a little bit, kind of recap a little bit what happened last night. Um, just some high points I picked out because some points was especially late was kind of crazy and was kind of looking on some stuff that affected the Saints. Before we start, and all day I was kind of watching to see what may or may not happen in the events leading up to the start of round two tonight. And there was some talk and some stuff going on. If anything pops, I've got my iPad next to me. Maybe I'll catch it and we can talk about that. But for the most part, kind of the subtitle on the thumbnail on this was um, I really only know what I don't know. And I came up with that because today, while kind of waiting to see if anything developed based off of what happened last night during the day today before the draft started, kind of like how am I going to approach? I'd started jotting down notes about some of the stuff that I wanted to talk about, but I kind of pictured last night the venue in Detroit where the draft was held is almost like a casino, and you had 32 gamblers walking in there. And the thing is with gambling, just normal card playing, anything that involves analysis, but there's always a basically chance. It's risk, it's random, it's luck, whatever you want to call it, that you don't know. And the only way you can make decisions is based off what you do know, which is everything that those prospects have been going through basically their whole football career, evolving film, what was on film in high school to get into college, what's on college that with the pros, the post playing process that starts as soon as the college season's over. You've got the Senior Bowl and various all-star games, the combine, pro days, everything's measured, everything's weighed, analyzed. But when it really comes down to it, the only thing you truly know is what you don't know. If it's at the craps table in a casino, you can do everything you can to hedge and back up your bets and play the odds and angles. But when that dice is rolled, you don't know the outcome. And there's little to nothing you can do to affect the outcome. All you can do is the best you can in the decisions you make before the shooter throws the dice. If you're picking stocks, if you're trying to predict the weather, it's all the same philosophy, really. The one thing you know for sure is what you don't know, what you can't control. The reason why I bring this up is because last night I did do a live stream with a couple buddies from my fantasy football league, and we kind of as we were talking, best guess had some people in the chat throwing in some comments, and a lot of what we knew collectively more or less happened. Maybe not exactly, but pretty close because we can't control the outcome. That's what we didn't know. But watching afterwards, stayed up a little late last night, watching some coverage that went on while we were doing our thing. And again this morning and seeing comments and all kind of stuff. I don't think, and I mean some real outrage at the Fuaga pick that the Saints at number 14 took Taliese Fuaga, offensive lineman for Oregon State. And I'll go into greater detail on this Sunday night. Let's Talk Saints is going to be live at 7 p.m. There it is on the screen. But just real briefly, and that's the starting point is the way the five offensive linemen played out, that the Saints were realistically going to have a chance at picking one of them at 14. And we did a lot of pre-draft stuff on the chaos that's the offensive line, why it's important, the scheme change, all that is stuff we more or less knew. Now, what we don't know at this point is any of the five of those five that were pretty much labeled they can start as rookies. They have, that high ceiling you're looking for potentially, but they all kind of universally agreed by people who know way more than me, other people like me, including some of them on the NFL Network or ESPN with a microphone in front of them, no more than any average fan, average person in the media, even some ex-players. I mean, they're you know what I mean if you watch the coverage that was endless. But what you don't know is, for example, a lot of this is being based on historical data, film review, even analysis. They'll pull a clip out, look at his hand placement, and whatever you want to pick to differentiate between them and decide if a pick is good or bad. Literally minutes after it happened, coming out of college, all that film study and analysis they're doing on that particular player. It's, nobody ever mentions there's about and this is Division One, the top level FBS, 130 ish teams, 85 scholarship players per team, plus walk-ons. If I don't know if that really matters in the discussion, but in this discussion, but they're there. Your talent pool is huge. And because it's huge, that gap from the worst player that's got on an FBS team to whoever the top one is, and maybe you consider Jaden Daniels, he won the Heisman. You can look at the awards winners, all kind of qualifiers about who is the best. That's a massive gap you couldn't cross. It's almost two different worlds. If you think of the NFL with 32 teams, roughly 55 players plus practice squad members, that talent pool shrinks by a huge percent when you do the math. And now that gap narrows. And what you're trying to figure out that you don't know is the player you draft, where they're going to hit into that talent pool, A, with very little on film that would accurately represent how good the collective NFL talent pool is compared to college. And again, the highest level of college. We're not even talking about smaller schools here. So it gets even bigger when you include them. So, grain of salt, I just wanted to kind of concentrate on what we know, and what we know on the offensive tackles, we think we know, and even this is, debatable, but universally, the people who have quibbled on who's better than who, where they should get drafted, what a team should do, but I'll kind of agree. Hey, these five guys, the floor is high. They should start or be able to start as rookies with the ceiling that some of these guys mentioned. Oh, the possibility of an all pro, everything else that goes with. So I'm happy with Fuaga. I really am. I'd have been happy with any of the five. There's some one person that I was very unhappy, but and we'll talk about that in a second. But on the first point, and I'm even happy that even the way it fell out, because there was always a chance the Saints would have up to four choices, depending on how the previous 13 picks went. Alt was almost pegged as number five to San Diego by the time the draft started, and that's basically what happened. But he wasn't going to go too much further than that, I don't think, because Tennessee was the second one a couple picks later to grab the second tackle. But the order, after all, was could have been any of the four. And to me, the biggest thing the Saints have the tree. You wouldn't. I'd be more uncomfortable if including all four of them, were gone, and they were saying, "Oh, this is what we have left." So at least there's a choice in what they know based on the historical information coming off film and analysis and the measurables they've got at the combine, how to mitigate what they don't know. How is any of this going to translate? Is he going to be able to develop? Is he going to work hard enough to develop? Something else that isn't talked about once upon a time in the NFL was basically a year round job. Even in the off season, there were so many mandatory camps and OTAs, and they still have them now, but not nearly like they used to. And off-season workout programs, it's all just kind of going by the wayside. And I have no empirical data to back this up other than the eye test, but collectively, by and large, the play in the NFL is actually going down because, my opinion, a lot of guys take a whole off season off and they're not developing. They're not doing stuff that back in the day. Yeah, I know I sound like an old man. They did, ready to play, ready to compete come training camp and be good football teams going forward. So a lot of that is personal initiative now up to the player to do everything he's supposed to do. So are you even going to get that? You don't know. The other quibble point was, well, we shouldn't draft on need. Well, it depends. I don't think you should reach on need. So if all five of these guys were going at 14, go somewhere else. But when you have basically what's agreed upon as an NFL caliber player, as far as anybody can tell, available to you at your worst position, and the I would guess somewhere around 20, including some of the players that we had a chance to take that other people wanted, would fall into the category of NFL ready as a rookie day one to basically go out, win a starting job, and be productive. But that was the biggest need was offensive line by far, hands down, unquestioned. I really, really no quibbles about going that path. The second point is I hate the Raiders. Hate them, hate them, hate them. Because to qualify, the one name that was hanging around forever that I went, we can figure out offensive line later if we're able to draft Brock Bowers. Because unlike some of the guys we basically passed on, Turner versus whoever your favorite defensive end was, or an interior lineman, if Newton or one of those guys. Powers just on so many levels, and it's earlier video I talked about just so versatile, brings so much to the table on the offensive side, and would even fit some of what the Saints are possibly looking for later in the draft, like a bigger possession type receiver, or more of a little bit of a bigger guy who can catch the ball, is athletic, and can block somewhat, and is athletic. Bowers checks, and even the big receiver that could come up in round two with like Keon Coleman and contested catch guy and all that other stuff. You kind of get some of that in Bowers too. So one pick away, and we're all like, yeah, Bowers, man. I'm definitely. What about Murphy? Or what about Turner or Fuaga? Bowers, Bowers is there. You have to take him. Yeah, and the Raiders killed that for us. So not happy with those guys. But truth be told, probably a great pick for them. Really, since they couldn't get a quarterback. I don't think you can go wrong with Bowers. Speaking of quarterbacks, that was point number 3, 6 taken in the first round. The first 3 kind of according to Hoyle, it was Williams, it was Daniels, it was May. Uh, quick thought on that, Williams. I don't personally have an opinion. Quarterbacks are just so difficult, and since I was pretty sure the Saints were not going to pick one no matter what happened, really wasn't too worried about differentiating between any of them. Um, more familiar with Daniels, obviously Louisiana guy, LSU, loved him. So I got bias on him. But Williams, it looks like Chicago's trying to do everything that they can to do what Houston basically did when you're drafting a rookie quarterback. Build as much around him, scheme wise, talent wise, everything else that you possibly can to put him in the best position to succeed early because when you draft him that high, you have to start him. First overall, second overall, third overall, they're going to see the field. I think Washington also along those lines, some of the off-season moves, and definitely hiring Cliff Kingsbury, which I do think is a good fit for Jane Daniels. I think Kyler Murray and what he was able to do, and when Kingsbury was running Arizona's offense as a head coach slash de facto offensive coordinator, Daniels brings a very similar style of play. If you were to put them side by side and start comparing everything between the two, I kind of when Murray was a rookie, and it would be one of those tit for tats where in one category one of them's better than the other category, the other one's better. But when you look at all the categories, like they all kind of fit what Kingsbury's trying to do, and I think Murray for the most part um, played fairly well in his time in Arizona when he was healthy. The next 3, though, Penix getting drafted by Atlanta, that was a WTF moment. Just going, what? Um, Especially with everything Atlanta has built into getting ready for this offseason or doing the offseason, getting ready for this season, include bringing in Kirk Cousins, a veteran quarterback, had a lot of money, even more than Derek Carr is making, I do believe, when you compare the contracts, but it's ballpark the same. And you basically Jordan loved him because when Aaron Rodgers was kind of ending that phase where everybody's like, okay, now we're going to start looking for the decline when he was Green Bay starter and they were this far away from really trying to get to that next Super Bowl for some of those seasons, and he needed some help around him, and they burned a first rounder in Jordan Love, which that pretty much started was at the time a rocky relationship between the quarterback and the club to the decline of full blown didn't end well at all. So that one just a head scratcher. Um, that I don't know. I don't know. What the so. And while the next 2, McCarthy at 10 and Knicks at 12, McCarthy to Minnesota, Knicks to Denver, kind of expected, but honestly, I just told you I didn't really look at quarterbacks all that much compared, but I just kind of feel like if you remember Pittsburgh grabbing Kenny Pickett a couple of years ago in the second round, I get Kenny Pickett vibes off both those guys and a little bit of Penix, but not as bad. Um, going, yeah, if I want to take those guys, I got to figure out a way to do it in the second round and not burn high draft capital on those 2 guys because it's good for everybody else. People are sliding back left and right and continue to do so. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So I think this helps the Saints in a weird way. Um, because obviously that's 2 to 3 more of the offensive linemen that the Saints were able to have in play. It put Bowers closer in play, I think, because if some of these teams would have went best available, yeah, I think Bowers clearly gets taken before 2 of those quarterbacks, if not 3. And I get Atlanta has Pitts, so they weren't even thinking Bowers, but Raiders drafted Myers in the second round last year to play tight end, and he finished the season decently like he was coming along, and that just went out the window. So who knows? I only know what I don't know. The thing that shocked me, first defensive player taken at 15, only 8 more over the next 17 picks. You only had 9 total in the first round. And some of the picks later on was even surprising because I feel like Arizona reached with Robinson, who would have been in the range of players at about 45 when the Saints have their second round pick. I think it's kind of the feeling. And he is a defensive edge is what they were calling him because that's what he played his last year in Missouri. But the 2 years previously, he was an interior defensive lineman that they had to go out to the edge. They needed him to, and he played really well out there for as big as he is. He's all power, so that's why I most thought he would fall a little out the first. Is um, there's not a lot of speed rush or anything super explosive stuff going on there, but he will flat run over people to get in the backfield and get to the quarterback. So there was always a chance he could move back to the interior. That may be what they're planning on him. But it where they took him in the mid-20s is just kind of I reach I think, but I only know what I know, so I don't know about that one. But we'll see how it plays out. Um, Wiggins, and it escapes me right now, and I didn't write it down. Who took him later on? Clemson corner, probably DeJean from Iowa would have been the pick there, maybe, but who knows? But that's relevant to the Saints because if the Saints do decide to go best available at 45, which I think pretty much everybody thinks they will, if Coleman or one of the receivers right there that they may be looking at isn't there, DeJean is, and I think it's DeJean. I want to call him DeJean because I am from Bayou Country, South Louisiana. They have him listed as an outside corner. And again, we have to go with what we know is what we don't know. But what we know is he, much like the offensive lineman we were talking about earlier, universally agreed to, hey, the floor is fine, the ceiling's unlimited. He primarily played outside corner at Iowa. He did play some other positions in the secondary. Kind of what they think they know about him is he can play anywhere in the secondary. You put him at outside corner, you can put him at safety, you can put him right up the Saints' alley in the secondary if he could possibly fill a bunch of roles. Well, depth wise, if he's not ready to become a full time starter, or if he can be a full time starter, bumping or pushing somebody, I think he would be a good fit. I think they still want to concentrate on offense, but like I said, if the offensive side doesn't work out and they want to go best available on the defensive side, he's still there. That would be a no brainer. There's a couple other Tyler Newbin, safety would probably fall on the best available there of Coleman and Wilson. I think would be the top two. Oh, and Franklin from Oregon, top 3 receivers remaining. So there's some options there. Plus some defensive interiors, a couple of edge guys. Um, uh, I think it's Isaiah Isaac, the guy that played opposite Chop Robinson in Penn State's going to be floating around there at that point. So wherever we're looking for the depth best available, trying to get some playing time and trying to get into the rotation or actually winning a starting job, there's a good little pool right there at 45 that they can pull from. So I think I know it's best available, but what I don't know is what's going to be available for them to draft and how they're looking at best available at each one of those spots. And The other thing is that kind of crazy madness that was going on in the second round, like Buffalo trading completely out of the first round. Uh, some other kind of peculiar picks in there. I don't want to say they're wrong, depending on team needs and what they were looking at, but there was some expectations that the names maybe would have been a little different. And then, like I said, you had some trades. Biggest one being is Frisco drafted Ricky Pierce all out of Florida, which is interesting. And I discounted this. I didn't even really think about it when I saw it pop up in a couple places yesterday that Frisco was talking about trading Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel prior to the draft or in the draft. Just kind of reading into that as they're looking for an extra first or part of maybe some type of deal to move way up. I kind of discounted. I was like, that sounds like just that pre-draft, um, either some media types trying to get some sparks, or maybe Frisco or some other organization trying to start some rumors, a little draft turmoil. Misinformation at that point is the closer you get to actually the round starting and the first pick of that round being made. I do know like stuff like that would just rumor flies around, and I don't know what the percentage is of what actually may be a correct rumor as opposed to just somebody throwing BS out there for some reason or another, player agent or organization. So I discounted it. Apparently, it had some traction, including Debo was even possibly on the trading block today. And the last I read anything on it, possibly Buffalo, who traded back and picked up draft capital, or New England, who's desperately trying to add some. And we're going to circle back to quarterbacks and rookies. Poor Drake May is in the Bryce Young situation last year in Carolina. The NFL playing talent pool in New England might be the only of the 32 NFL teams that the majority of those guys probably would be best suited going back to college. Just saying. There's not a lot of NFL talent on that roster, unfortunately for him. So New England wanting to run a shot at Ayuk or Debo to help him out makes a whole lot of sense. I don't know what they had available to do it, because if they've got to give up draft capital in this draft and in next year's draft, even less likely they can get a lot of solid players they need to get in there to help out Drake May. So, Drake May, buddy, good luck to you. You're going to need it. But as far as the Saints are concerned, they could possibly be in this mix of, I don't know about necessarily trading for Debo. I kind of threw that out there in a text chain with some of my family. We discussed it a little bit, but I think the biggest thing is age and money. I don't know if the Saints could really do anything, but I do know if they decide they can, they'll figure out a way to move up and or trade for him. Or the other thing is some type of, again, same veteran player, possibly somebody on the Saints roster. That could be a couple candidates trying to jump in there and using that to trade up or trade for more draft capital. Even a possibility at some point tonight with all the day 3 picks they have tomorrow, packaging a bunch of those and trying to get like maybe into the third round. Or I think the biggest takeaway is because of kind of that turmoil in the back end. And I wouldn't say turmoil, just a lot of well, I guess in some cases it could have been turmoil, but just unexpectedness. Players being taken, movement, Pearsall kind of confirming what the Frisco rumor was earlier. I mean, obviously, I don't know why they would take a really good receiver at 31, considering what they already have on their roster. So, um, I I know what I don't know. So I don't know what tonight holds. I think it could be a lot of movement, a lot of craziness is a possibility. Um, to my cousin earlier had texted me. It's like, man, I bet you that there's just all kind of activity today. And I responded, I was like, yeah, and I bet you there was after that, starting around pick 24 last night onward, what was going on. There was probably a lot of activity during that portion of the draft, like Buffalo making the trades to get out of the first round. There was probably activity all night. There's probably guys who are literally working on no sleep that are about ready to walk into the room and start picking again in a few minutes. So um, I think it could be interesting. So, and I think the Saints could be a player in some way, shape, or other. And I think if they sit at hold tight and sit at 45 and don't actually do anything, I think there's going to be a good solid football player for them that is gonna help them can fit what they're trying to do, whether they're looking at offense or defense, best player available, which again seems to be the consensus. And I think that with drafting Fuaga definitely opened it up there. And the only other thing I'm gonna say collectively is, kind of went back today and was looking at some of the pre-draft stuff. The depth in this draft is offensive linemen and wide receivers. And I think in both cases, and this is the only thing that maybe since the Saints only have that pick at 45 right now, they've got to wait over 100 picks before they pick again tomorrow. Is just be careful when it comes to those two positions. Meaning, like an offensive lineman, you had the top five, and you had 4 or 5 or so. Most of them got drafted last night, and the rest of them are probably going to go pretty quick tonight. Where there wasn't a great gap between the two. I mean, it wasn't some super wide chasm that you couldn't cross. It was more like a ditch you could jump over without even taking a running start. In receiver, you had the top 2 clearly. Seems to have been some debate in some circles on the third one and a Dunze, but I'm like, I don't really think you could go wrong. Like Chicago, I think is just good pick there. A little bit of a separation gap with the next group coming out. Pearsall being in the middle of Keon Coleman, Wilson from Michigan, who is not the Johnson I talked about in a as a good grab around round 5. But the point is now you're kind of right around 10, give or take, either way. And much like offensive linemen, as you kind of go down to the next group, which I think is larger, roughly like 12 to 18, somewhere in that range. Again, it's a jump a ditch to get to that group of players. But even more importantly, I think it's um, the only position where you could pretty much confidently say once you're in that so you're out the elite tier, you're into the top tier, and now we're talking about the middle tier. So when you get into the guys who are kind of grouped around 20 and 25, they're almost part of that what would normally be considered the middle tier. I think it's massively huge. There's a lot of talent in there. A lot of it's going to need to be developed. But the point being is the Saints, because some are predicting possibly a second offensive lineman, some again receiver, which we've been talking about. Just be careful that what you're taking at 45 and then comparing to what is potentially available there at 150, that somewhere else at another position, the best available that's available at 45. Now you have that massive gap between what you're going to get there and what you could possibly get at 150, barring no trade up. That's the only reason why I was never really high on taking, or the main reason I was never really high on taking Keon Coleman at 45, McCaffrey, Johnson, trying to make some kind of move into the fourth round and maybe get a Brendan Rice. And there are others that just kind of keep floating around there that wouldn't necessarily, may not be quite as good as Coleman, but I don't think it's as big as a gap, say from Coleman to Adunze slash Harrison slash uh, Malik Neighbors. So basically all I got. I actually went about 5 minutes longer than I thought I was, so very sorry about that. And draft, they probably already started, maybe even pulled the first name out the hat, so to speak. So just a reminder, real quick, live Sunday night, 7 p.m. Hit the like button for me, subscribe, post some comments, let me know what you think. Till next time, peace out. Who dat?